The mystery of stop playing. I have to admit, stop playing has never been something that I've really enjoyed on the horn, and part of the reason is because I I wasn't that great at it, and so I had to work really hard on it. And the thing that really kicked my stop playing into gear was last year I prepared the concert etude by Esa-Pekka Salonen for the IHCA competition, and that piece has more stopped horn than any other piece that I've ever played in my life, in addition to being the hardest piece I've ever learned. So I'm going to share with you guys just a couple of quick tips that have helped me to get things a lot cleaner in the stop sound and to make things a lot more resonant and even a lot more loud. And so before we get into the stopped horn playing as a whole, we probably should talk about just general hand position. And this really comes from my first college teacher, Bruce Barnell. Shout out to Bruce if you're out there. And basically, the thing that you should think is if you're in the Miss America competition and you're a lovely lady walking down the stage, you're going to be waving to the audience like this, and that is pretty much horn hand position right here. So the other thing that I tell my students a lot is, if you think about giving the horn a handshake, the horn should or the hand should be pretty much straight up and down on the bell, and you should have the horn in the bell pretty much as far as it can go until you can't bring it any further in without actually collapsing the hand. So once again to review, so we want to make sure all the fingers are together, make sure that I call this the alligator mouth. Make sure the alligator mouth is closed. We don't want him biting the bell or biting the airstream. And then we're going to go ahead and put the hand in the bell as far as it can go up until the big knuckle. So just as a demonstration, if you've never done this before, so you can hear how much having the hand in the bell actually affects the pitch. So here's just an F at the bottom of the staff without the hand in the bell. Versus, I'll slowly place the hand in the bell as I'm doing that. So you'll hear it's almost a half step of difference. So really, really important to have the hand in the bell in the correct position. And you'll have to experiment with this a little bit. For some people, it might need to be a little bit further out, depending on how big your hand is. But one of the cool things about stop playing is that it'll tell you exactly, or it'll tell you if your hand is in the right position, because you should be able to just bring the hand down like a hinge to make the stop sound happen. So just a little note about how stopped horn is created as well. I know a lot of people will disagree with this, but it's the fact. So if anybody out there has played hand horn, you know what I'm about to say is true. When you stop the horn, it does not raise the pitch. The only thing that happens when you bring the hand down is that you're lowering the pitch. So as I just said, so if you're playing an A flat with first valve, so it's actually a very flat A flat, the reason we can bring the pitch so far, the reason that we end up actually using a fingering that's about a half step lower is because we're coming from a pitch that is in essence a lot sharper. So we could consider that a really, really flat A flat or a really sharp G. So that's usually why going one half step lower for the partial ends up working. And usually it works because we're coming from a flat partial up above. So yeah, just to demonstrate it again, so like you can experiment with this yourself. So you're actually always playing a higher partial than what's written when you're playing a stop note. So again, here's that A flat. But here's an open F sharp just as written. So and then here's that A flat. So that's what happens when you are actually doing something stopped. You're coming down from a lower partial. And so a couple of other things that helped you to get that nice nasally sound on the stop note that you just heard. So you want to make sure that you're pressing hard against the bow with the palm. And then something else that I also realized a little bit later in my playing career is you also want to push hard against this part of the back of the hand. So you want to push hard here, and you want to also push hard against this side of the bell, because if you don't, you won't get a proper seal. and that will make the sound be too open and not have that nasal buzzing quality, especially in the softer side of the playing. It won't come through as much. You might be able to get away with it in the louder stuff because you're putting a little bit more air into the instrument, a little more volume, but the soft stuff won't be as nasally as you want it to be. And so that's the first thing I always make sure of. So again, just make sure your general hand position is where you want it to be. Make sure that you are just hinging the hand down and not coming any further or out of the bell, and then make sure that you're pushing hard against both the palm and the back of the hand. And then the other trick that I learned recently is something that Annie Bosler taught me. Annie was one of my teachers. And if you go to your stop hand position and you just put a little bit of air through the instrument, you'll actually feel where the stop is inefficient because you'll feel some air coming out through the bell. So you can, again, if you have your horn, you can go ahead and do this with me. So even just then, I mean, I do stop playing a decent amount. Not as much as I did when I was prepping the concert etude, but even then, just in my first go, I was feeling a little bit of air. Second time's a little bit better. So just I'll show you the difference. So here's if the first version where I have just a little bit of air leaking out. Versus so they're slowly sealed now. So that actually rattles, and I can actually hear like I have a stand right next to me, and it's rattling a little bit. So you'll have to experiment with that, and it's different for everybody. Just again, depending on your hand shape and size. You'll put some air through the horn and see where the air is leaking out, and then you can just put a little more pressure in those spots, and then just adjust the hand as necessary. I actually do this in orchestra all the time. If I have a little bit of a rest before I come in on a stop note, I'll do that. I'll actually put my hand in the stop position, blow a little bit of air, try to find out where the inefficiency is, where the air is leaking out, and then I will go to play. If it's a really fast change, you don't have the luxury. You also have to do the best that you can and just practice practice going back and forth between stop and non-stop on the same note, and just try to get it as clean as possible. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much all I had to say about stop playing and hand position in general. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. For more tips like these ones, make sure to like and subscribe, and to make sure to check out my free masterclass in the link below. It's got some really great tips, especially if you're struggling in the upper register or endurance. I talk about some ways that I was able to solve those for myself and for my students. So thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.